Call to order the April 27th meeting of the Clive City Council. Will the clerk please call roll?
Mayor Edwards,
Here.
council members Klein,
Here.
McCoy,
Here.
Judkins, Weaver, here, Michelinani.
Here.
Very good. Everyone is accounted for. If you would all rise and join me in the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next would be the approval of the agenda.
Move approval. Second.
Motion is second to approve the agenda. Further discussion. Seeing none, with all those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, nay. The agenda is approved. Next, we have a proclamation for National Public Works Week, which will be May 21st through 27th. So let me read the proclamation to you. Whereas public works services provided by our community are an integral part of our citizens' everyday lives, and whereas the support of an understanding informed citizenry is vital to the efficient operation of public works in programs such as water, sewer, traffic, streets, water resources, and engineering. And whereas the health, safety, and comfort of the community greatly depends on these facilities and services. And whereas the quality and effectiveness of these facilities, as well as their planning, design, and construction, is vitally dependent on the efforts and skill of public works professionals. And whereas the efficiency and qualified and dedicated personnel who staff public works departments is materially influenced by the people's attitude and understanding of the importance of the work they perform. Now, therefore, I declare the week of May 21 through 27 as National Public Works Week, and encourage all citizens to become informed about public works. Thank you. And Jeff, any comments?
No, very fortunate to have a great staff here that does a lot of work for the city and does a great job of taking care of the needs of our citizens. So, Julie, recognize and appreciate what they do.
We appreciate everything that Public Works does. Very good. We'll move to the next item, which is citizen presentation. This is the opportunity for anyone to approach the council on an item that is not on the agenda. And while Pete checks online, let me just remind everyone of our operating principles. Clive supports the pillars of character counts, endeavoring at all times to promote and model the principles of trustworthiness, respect, responsibility, fairness, caring, and citizenship. In conducting our work, we expect that everyone will act in a respectful manner consistent with these principles. So Pete, do we have anyone online tonight?
No, Your Honor.
Do we have anyone in the chamber? If so, please come to the podium and give us your name and address for the record.
How are you? My name is Sachi Kalra. I work with Ira Realty, and that's my husband, Aaron.
Kalra.
And we jointly are developing 15595 Emerald Isle. I'm also the agent representing the project. There'll be 41 units that'll be coming up. So we are here humbly requesting, we would not like to see a car wash,
Which
is gonna come.
I know it's on the
across from us.
consent, it's on the consent agenda for next month.
Well, it's on the consent agenda for, and what we'll probably do on consent, we'll pull it from consent so that we can have staff address what's
Sure.
being planned.
But we like to express ourselves, we are not in favor of car wash over there. A lot of lights, noise, traffic. It's a big concern to us.
Well, thank you. And it's part of the record, but as I say, we have a consent item to set the public hearing for
Yes.
a couple of weeks, and we'll have staff address that at that point.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
we will be back. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Does anyone else here in the chamber address the council on item not on the agenda? Then we'll move to consent items, and
I move the consent with pulling aside Z for additional consideration.
All right, we have a motion to approve consent except for item Z, which will be considered separately. The motion is second, further discussion. If not, would the council please vote? And then would the clerk please post that vote? And our consent items pass, I hope, by a vote of 4-0. Indeed, I'm predictive. All right. Now, we pulled out Z, which is the public hearing for 156th Street and Emerald Isle rezoning. Doug, you want to give an update on why we're setting a public hearing and what that's all about?
Certainly. What you have before you is a standard procedural matter for the city to consider a request from a property owner that has obtained the requisite amount of land consent for the request of rezoning of the property from an R1 single family to a C4 commercial. Just for general reference, the parcels that are under consideration are highlighted in blue. As you can see, the current zoning of that property is R1, similar to the adjacent properties to the north in the Emerald Isle subdivision. To the south of the subject site is already been zoned for commercial, consistent with the plans that were reviewed by you folks a couple of years ago for the Come and Go gas station and their supporting development. What they are requesting is consideration again to rezone to the commercial land use. Again, those same properties are shown on this particular plan, which is the city's long-range comprehensive land use plan. So it is anticipating over time that this property is developed into some form of commercial. So again, what is being asked of you tonight is simply to set the public hearing for later in May and to forward the request to the Planning and Zoning Commission. So the Planning and Zoning Commission would review the requested rezoning application at their next meeting on May 4th. They will review that in conformance with the city's requirements for rezoning process and make a recommendation to you folks prior to your public hearing.
Questions for Doug?
I guess just a point for clarification, if I may, Doug. So today is just setting the hearing for council full consideration after P and Z's consideration for May 23rd, correct?
Correct.
And so the next opportunity citizens would have to weigh in on or discuss this issue is actually May 4th at the P and Z meeting. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And that's also located here at council chambers?
No.
Please go ahead and provide that notice if you would.
Yes. You folks have a council meeting here on the 4th. Planning and Zoning Commission will be meeting at the public safety facility as we do on those occasions where the council has their first meeting of the month in session here. So a notice has been sent to all property owners within 310 feet, advising them of the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, including the time, date, and location, as well as the public hearing date for later in May.
And Doug, would you, Your Honor, if I could, please, for the council, I know in situations like this, there's the occasion where a protest petition can be filed. Has staff received one of those petitions? And could you share with the council from a process standpoint what that means?
Certainly. As we send out notice to property owners, we advise, again, all property owners within 310 feet of the subject site of their right to make a protest petition. That is in addition to their opportunity to come to the meeting and voice their concerns, both to the P&Z as well as the city council. But this is a formal process which states that if 20 or more than 20% of the property within a 310-foot boundary of the subject rezoning site is objecting to the request for rezoning, that requires then that the city council take in a supermajority action on the rezoning request. So in this particular case, we have received a protest petition from several property owners that in total exceed 20% of the land area within 310 feet. So at such time that it comes to you folks for consideration, in order to pass the ordinance, you will require a 4/5 vote.
Thanks for all that clarification. Anything else for Doug?
So at this point, though, we're just talking procedural to set the public hearing in order to go through the process. Is that right?
Correct. Today, again, is completely administrative, setting the public hearing. Staff will put together their report and analysis of the property, present that to the Planning and Zoning Commission. They will make a recommendation to you folks. That'll be read at the public hearing. And then ultimately, you will have to make a decision on approving or not approving the proposed rezoning. What also goes along with the rezoning request, at least for the city of Clive, is a concept or development plan. So the development plan is intended to provide some general idea of the proposed use of the property. It is not a detailed site plan, doesn't provide approvals to construct. It's simply used as a tool to help us evaluate the rezoning request. So specifically, the concept will lay out a generalized use so that we can evaluate its impact on roadway and other utility infrastructure of the city.
So what we're looking for is just a resolution setting public hearing.
I'll move that resolution.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to set the public hearing on May the 25th at 6 p.m. Further discussion? If not, would the council please vote? And would the clerk please post that vote?
Aye.
All right, that public hearing has been set by a 4-0 vote. All right, that concludes the consent items. We'll move into a presentation. Jeff.
Mayor, Council, good evening. It's my pleasure to introduce to you our newest Public Works Operations Specialist, Adam Greiman. Adam currently works for Casey's. He's a startup service technician, has a lot of good technical, mechanical experience that will be valuable to our team, as well as a great fit to add to our team as far as personality, and we're looking forward to bringing him on board. So with that, I introduce you to Adam and him say hi.
Adam, you want to say a few words? Give us a little background.
Yeah, I've been in the service industry for about 20 years now. And, I'm grateful to be able to be a service to the community. I just relocated to Clive and really excited to get started and get to meet some new folks and see a lot of new faces and hopefully bring some smiles.
Well, welcome. We're glad to have you here.
Welcome aboard.
Thanks, Jeff.
You bet. Thank you.
All right, we'll move into our action items, and the first one is a public hearing. Did we publish the appropriate public notice?
Yes, Your Honor. Public notice was published in the Des Moines Register on April 11th, 2023.
Very good. Jim?
I was leaving just when it's getting good, right?
Yeah.
You have that effect on people.
Yeah, I don't know how many smiles I'm going to bring with the information I have here tonight or not. But, here to discuss the traffic signalization project that we've been discussing on 161st and Hickman. We received bids last week. 3 bids were received. You have that tabulation in your packet. Unfortunately, the low bid was 20% over the engineer's estimate. And looking at the tab, that can really be accounted for in 3 bid items. The paving itself on Hickman to lengthen the turn lanes, the traffic signalization, and the mobilization costs. In discussing next steps with our consulting engineer, we don't feel it's in our best interest to relet at this time, given where we're at in the construction season and with the time being of the essence with Fairway opening in the near future here. You did approve a 2080E agreement on this project on consent tonight. So just to look at the funding that's in place, the city of Waukee is on the hook for 25% of the total project cost. The remainder for Clive, when you factor in engineering and legal, is approximately $700,000. When you account for the preliminary assessments that we went through on the project and the anticipated DOT funding, The remainder of approximately 275,000 is accounted for in the current CIP. So we would be recommending award to Hawkeye Paving Corporation tonight, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Jim? Is there anyone here in the chamber who wishes to address the council on this matter? Being known, I entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Move to close the public hearing.
Second.
A motion and a second to close public hearing. Is there any further discussion? If not, would the council please vote?
Aye.
And would the clerk please post that vote? And the public hearing is closed by a vote of 4-0.
Move to resolution approving and confirming plans and specs.
We have a resolution. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Further discussion? Seeing none, would the council please vote?
Aye.
And would the clerk please post that vote? And that passes by a vote of 4-0.
Move to consideration of the bids.
Second.
Motion and a second to consider the bids. Further discussion? Seeing none, would the council please vote? And will the clerk please post that vote? And that passes by a vote of 4-0.
Move to resolution awarding the contract to Hawkeye Paving Corporation.
Second.
Motion is second to award the bid. Further discussion? Seeing none, would the council please vote?
Aye.
And would the clerk please post that vote? And that award is passed by a vote of 4-0. Thank you, Jim. Next, we have a public hearing on a vacation of a temporary turnaround easement. Did we publish the appropriate public notice? Matthew?
Yes, Your Honor, that was published in the Des Moines Register on April 17th, 2017. 2023, sorry.
Thank you very much. Doug?
Simple request in front of you tonight. As we went through the development process in the Berkshire North subdivision area, we ran across a temporary turnaround easement that was associated with the townhome construction. That easement is no longer necessary. Unfortunately, the language in the easement required the city to actually take an affirmative action to vacate the easement rather than our typical it goes away when it's no longer needed type language. So in this particular case, what we're asking for is your consideration to vacate this temporary easement that is no longer necessary.
Thank you, Doug. Questions for Doug? If not, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing unless there's someone in the audience wanting to discuss the issue. Seeing none.
Motion to close public hearing. Second.
The motion is second to close the public hearing. Further discussion? Seeing none, will the council please vote? And will the clerk please post that?
Aye.
And our public hearing is closed by a vote of 4-0. Now we need a motion of vacation. Anybody for a vacation?
Motion to vacate. Second.
Motion is second to vacate. Further discussion? Seeing none, would the council please vote?
Aye.
And then would the clerk please post that vote?
This mayor humor.
It's like that joke.
It's a dad joke.
That passes by a vote of 4-0. Next, Richard, we have the Circina Park improvements.
Thank you. Tonight, you have two items before you that represent the next steps in moving forward with the Circina Park improvements. These are based on the conversation we had at your previous council meeting where we're recommending that you reject all the bids for contract B because we did not receive any bids for contract A. So that's item A. And then item B will be setting the hearing for hopefully getting bids for one project for Circina Park at your June 8th meeting. We've been working with RDG to get the plans combined into one bid package. And upon approval of these items tonight, we'll get that on the street. We expect bids back on May 31st, and hopefully we'll have some positive news at your June 8th meeting.
Very good. Questions for Richard? If not, we'll entertain a motion on the resolution rejecting the bids.
One quick question.
Yes, go ahead.
Have we gotten any feedback from the vendors at this point, or have we solicited feedback on going this path if we're going to have better results?
Yeah, so we've gotten a little bit more feedback. RDG as well as our team have done a little bit of additional calls. And what we really have just come down to is we think the timing was bad. They'd already had kind of their construction cards filled up for the year. So by doing this, we believe that we're going to be in good shape. We extended the deadlines into the end of May for 2024, which should give them opportunities to start on it this fall and have something to go in the spring as well. And also, we're taking that list of potential contractors, and as soon as these hit the street, we're going to send emails and make phone calls to them, saying, just letting them know that they're out there. So hopefully between those two different things that we should be able to generate multiple bids.
Great, thank you. I'll move to resolution rejecting contract D bids.
Second.
Motion and second to reject the bids. Further discussion? Seeing none, would the council please vote? And would the clerk please post those votes?
Aye.
And those bids are rejected by a vote of 4-0.
Move to resolution setting the public hearing for June 8th, 2023 at 6 p.m.
Second.
Motion and second on the resolution to set the public hearing. Further discussion? Seeing none, would the council please vote? And will the clerk please post that vote?
Aye.
And the public hearing is set by a vote of 4-0.
I'll start earning the keep now.
Let's hope so. All right, we've got utility rate adjustments to discuss. Second considerations, Pete.
Thank you, Your Honors. This is the second consideration of the water, sewer, stormwater rates, along with the changes to the irrigation and residential stormwater rate structures. At this point, we have not had any comments from the public. Staff recommends approval of the second reading.
Very good.
Boy, move that ordinance number 1131, having been considered by the council, be voted on for passage prior to its final adoption.
Second. Okay, we have a second consideration and second further discussion. Seeing none, will the council please vote? And will the clerk please post the vote?
Aye.
Likes raising rates so much that he had to make the motion on this one.
So that passes by a vote of 4-0 on 1131.
That's true.
You didn't hear that, did you, Mayor, down there?
Well, I'd like to proceed to 1132.
And I will with a little flair. I've sensed the comment down there. Move that ordinance number 1132 pertaining to sewer rates with any raise being with Ted Weaver be considered by the council, be voted on for passage prior to its final adoption.
Second.
I would hope there'd be no further discussion, but just checking. Seeing none, would the council please vote? And will the clerk please post that vote?
Aye.
And that passes by a vote of 4-0.
Move that ordinance number 1131,
Nope.
No, 1133.
1133,
Raised 1131 again.
having been considered by the council, be voted on for passage prior to its final adoption.
Second.
Further discussion? Seeing none, will the council please vote? And will the clerk please post that vote for the second consideration of 1133?
Aye.
And it passes by a vote of 4-0. Thank you, Pete.
Matthew, if I could have the lectern camera, please. Okay, so I wanted to briefly update the council on our progress to execute our public education campaign on the irrigation and residential stormwater updates. This is a page that is not available to everybody to see right now. It's continue to build it. But the content here is consistent with what is being shared in the May utility newsletter, which is going to feature on the front in the mayor's letter and on page 4, extensive information about the irrigation rate changes, commercial and residential, and the stormwater changes. The page you see here will be our hub for directing folks who have questions. My team and with Liz are putting together an extensive, about 7-page long FAQ, and we'll be building an accordion style feature below these inputs here that list out all of those questions broken out by stormwater, irrigation, and then more general utility rate questions. We have been working on the best way to inform residents about finding out the tier that they're going to be in. We've built a tool that allows staff to go to a map and quickly pull that up. But we think the best way for our residents to, at least at the beginning, get to know what their rated is to send an email to utilities@cityofclive.com. I'll be staffing that email address, and then we'll be replying back to folks to share their tier information, and as appropriate, then start casework if they want to then work with us on figuring out a different measurement for their impervious area. So good progress, and we're ready to make sure that folks have accurate and timely information about this upcoming change.
Will there be a link on the main City of Clive website to this page?
Yep, the way that we'll handle that on the main page is we use the big red banner at the top for really important stuff like snow ordinance, safety things. But we also use a black box that shows up here at the bottom that will be, I'm not going to be able to log in to show you what that looks like now, but I think many of you have been to our site and seen that black box pop up. We're going to leave that up for the months of May, June, July, and as long as we need to keep fielding all of the information from folks. I'll also have a pinned story that'll be number 1 here in the city news section. So people will be able to quickly click on that and then be directed. So, sorry. Then be directed back to this page.
What do you think the interaction will be between folks on here and you? Well, to the email site. Can you guess? I mean, numbers are, and I guess my bigger question is, can you handle the number? And where is your communication person in queue? Are they coming or?
They're coming. They're not slated to start until July. So much of this lifting will be moving through me as a starting point. My other big communications projects right now involve our SQR program that's getting started, but Julia, our colleague, is doing a great job managing that and the waiting list that we previously had, and then going through that hiring process with our new communications staff person that'll be joining the team. So I feel like at this point, my bandwidth is going to be tight. If we need to expand the team of people who can help out, that's where Liz and I will have a conversation about how the billing team can potentially help field some of those early questions.
Okay.
The way that the email is set up is it's a shared email account. So multiple people see it and can see what is sort of pending, what needs to be responded to.
We have like one chance, right, to wow them or to get them to, we miss them.
Yep.
They get a little angry.
Right. The splits, I think, are working a little bit in our favor to manage the casework. 80% of residential customers are going to fall in the average or low tier. And so they'll see either a negligible, not negligible, a very, very minor increase in their stormwater fee or a significant decrease down into something sub $6. Everybody's paying $10.42 right now.
So what was, I guess, was there a reason behind not making that kind of map available, like making it a little more interactive that way?
We may choose to ultimately do that, and it's already built. And we feel confident about the integrity of the data that we're showing folks. What we didn't necessarily want to do is put every resident in a situation where their neighbor could come look at what they're paying versus others.
Good point.
And when we saw the map, just at a staff level, we quickly kind of had an aha moment because it shows quite a bit of diversity throughout the entire city, of cities that are in the biggest, or properties in the biggest tier to properties that are in the smallest. Sort of actually encouraging to think that we don't just have single neighborhoods where it's all big homes versus some that are smaller. It's actually a nice mix, even in some of our newest neighborhoods where we've had, on average, larger square feet of impervious area. So that's one where we may need to keep adapting.
I mean, there's only a subset of residents who actually use, well, I guess we're talking about stormwater. I was thinking storm, irrigation. Yeah, okay, never mind.
I think to mention too, maybe I said it, Pete, and I missed it, but we're also producing a video that will be posted on social media and our website. And we want to talk a little bit about that as well.
Yep. We have our draft storyboard finished. The script is all completed as well. And next week is our goal to have the first draft of that video ready to go. But the site, And the posting on social and the newsletter will all be hitting mailboxes and hitting inboxes starting next week. But our digital assets and this place to land will all be ready to go by tomorrow.
But even there, and it's staggered because everyone doesn't get their bill on the same date, right? I mean,
That's correct.
So I would be surprised if it's like an overwhelming number. I would think it'd be staggered over time.
Yep. Councilman McCoy's point is right. This is your first chance to make a great impression. You don't get a second one frequently.
One thing to point out,
Oh, it's recorded.
Oh, okay.
one thing important to point out to the council too is with pending your decision on the third reading next week. So then the rates will be published and then they'll apply to June usage or June bills payable in July. So we do have a little bit of run time run up to that. And I think with these FAQs that we're developing, one thing that staff will be doing is also sharing some of that documentation with you all as you get questions from constituents directly to you. There might be some that you're comfortable fielding, ones that you want to defer to utility billing or Pete or myself in terms of maybe further detail. We fully anticipate that there's going to be some casework, especially as we get further into the irrigation season. That is a different discussion in terms of, that'll ramp up July, August. And these rates will, especially the irrigation rates now, will be in effect. But one thing I will also mention similar to Pete's point about stormwater residential rates is, again, we crafted those rate tiers to give ourselves some flexibility, pending what might happen with regional water, that there's still, the vast majority of our irrigators, especially on the residential side, fit into that first tier. So again, it's going to be, and that was the whole point, right? In terms of the environmental stewardship of water, where those that are irrigating at a very high level are essentially paying a penalty or having a disincentive to irrigate at that level. So engagement on that casework will be an educational opportunity of, have you considered, and Pete and the team will be putting a lot of links to resources on the website of, research and other information on maybe what's the better way to, irrigate your lawn to get the results you're looking for. Or if you want that consistent green lawn, even the middle of August, you're going to pay for it versus, the drinking water that you have inside your house for, hygiene and livability. So it'll be challenging casework, but there's also a great policy story and educational point behind everything that you all have directed us to implement here. So
yeah,
maybe we're overestimating. I mean, I don't know how many people really look at their bill.
I think people look when they don't recognize the number all of a sudden, though.
It's drastic, but it doesn't sound like there's going to be a drastic change.
Even so, for those, whatever the number is, we want to do our best for all of them
Yeah.
and help them understand, make sure they have accurate, timely information.
I'm saying it's not going to be a rush of numbers of people calling and emailing. But those that are due, they're going to want the answers.
Yep. Similar to the way that we've kind of prepared ourselves for things like, think about this, over 1,000 households we mailed information to about the Little Walnut Creek project. It's a pretty big number. It'll be significantly larger this time, though not all that different from 1,000. And this was a big disruption to an amenity all of those neighbors really enjoy. I managed the casework that came through on that and continue to do that, and it's been manageable. So we've got good tools in place, I think, to be able to handle this well.
Any other questions for Pete? Thanks, Pete.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Move on to the urban renewal area. That's a third consideration.
Yeah. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Now that the urban renewal area has been adopted and approved, the next step in the process is to approve the taxes levied for the TIF property, both Dallas and Polk County. So we can utilize those funds in the urban renewal area. So staff recommends third and final reading to ordinances 1129 and 1130.
Thank you, Liz. Questions for Liz?
All right. Move that, got it. I get there. Move that ordinance number, I'm a little slow these days here. Move that ordinance number 1129 be considered for the third time, placed upon its passage and adopted.
And we have a second on the third reading of 1129. Further discussion? Seeing none, would the council please vote? And would the clerk please post that vote?
Aye.
That passes by a vote of 4-0. Ordinance number 1129 is declared to have been enacted.
Move that ordinance number 1130 be considered for the third time, placed upon its passage and adopted.
Second.
Motion is second on 1130. Further discussion? Seeing none, would the council please vote?
Aye.
And would the clerk please post that vote? And that passes by a vote of 4-0. Ordinance number 1130 is declared to have been enacted. All right. Next up, we've got our GEO bonds.
Matt's pulling up the presentation from PFM, but as you know, our AA1 bond rating was affirmed by Moody's following our rating call. And we've had a very exciting day. So I will ask Suzanne from PFM to lead us through the details regarding the sale today. Come on, Suzanne. While she's approaching, I just want to thank her and Dorsey and Whitney and everybody that's been involved in putting the bonds together. And so I appreciate that. And then when you're done, you'll talk about the Moody's rating methodology.
And then
And
do I
that's
have
what-
copies of that already? This is.
They do not have that.
No,
yet.
they don't
Okay,
have it.
okay, and then that's the one we need signed.
Yes.
Oh, is that Matt? Okay. All right.
Thank you.
I got it. It just has to, she'll just have to scroll, but that'll be fine. So you can put it on here. So here, when you get to this part, just scroll the mouse.
Okay,
You'll be fine.
perfect. All right, well, good evening. So we took bids today on 3,655,000 general obligation corporate purpose bonds, the 2023 A series to fund the 24 CIP. We received bids from 7 bids from 38 different firms today, with true interest costs ranging from 2.91% to 3.29%. So when I saw we were below 3, I was very excited. The market, as you know, rates have continued to rise. Rates are up, not a percent, maybe 80 basis points over last year where we were. So to be under 3%, that's a win. I was very pleased with that. The winning bid came from Hilltop Securities out of Dallas, Texas at 2.9149%. And the cover bid, that second place bid, came from Robert W. Baird out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin at 2.98%. So like 0.07%, 7 basis points different between the first and second place. Sometimes that's less than a basis point. And the fact that we had 38, almost 40 basis points between the first bid and the last bid, Hilltop really wanted the bonds today. So that was good. That was good for the city, good for the taxpayers. The pricing, when I look at where we priced last year at the AAA versus now the AA1, pricing was about 10 basis points higher overall over the whole 10 years. It was 1 to 3 basis points in the first 5 years, and then around 10 basis points in years 5 through 7, and then sort of widened once you get out past year 7, which kind of surprised me. I thought we would have priced better, but I will say that that's still very excellent pricing. We were just 20 basis points over the AAA scale. So that to me is a win for sure. And so with that, I don't know if there's any questions, but I was very pleased today. And this is all within the city's $1.48 tax rate. This is paid by taxes.
I was curious if maybe some of that, like the bidding that did occur, I was wondering if that's because maybe more municipalities have been impacted by this new Moody's rating?
So I am going to get into how many different credits were impacted, but I will say that 3.6 million is a little small for kind of average size for the market. And bank qualified always attracts, but these are some really big underwriters that bid on your bonds today, which is why I think it priced so well, because volume is down in the market. In 2022, the overall market volume was down 30%. We're now down 30% over 22. Rates have gone up. Bid costs, construction costs have gone up. Cities are borrowing less, and credit pressures are just part of that. It's just costing more to borrow. So there's fewer people borrowing right now, and there's a lot of federal stimulus money, which doesn't help. But anyway, yeah, so market volume is down, which drew a lot of good bidders today. Hilltop, I don't think Hilltop's ever won and that I can remember in the last 5 years for sure.
Has gotten our ours over the last couple of years.
And I want to say Hutchinson Shock, it's mostly the Midwest. Hilltop is outside the Midwest heavy hitters for sure. So yeah.
So what we're looking for is a resolution awarding.
I'll move a resolution awarding the GEO corporate purpose bonds.
Second.
Hilltop.
Sorry. Second?
Second.
Okay. A motion and a second. Further discussion? Seeing none, would the council please vote? And will the clerk please post that vote?
Aye.
That award passes by a vote of 4-0. Now we'll hear a little bit about Moody's.
I will say, Your Honor, before we jump into that, from a staff perspective, we're very happy with this bond sale today to be below 3 in this market, which, obviously we were used to below 2s in our past before the interest rates were higher. But I think and I know Suzanne will get into this. I know they're, with our bond rating going from AAA to AA1 because of this methodology change. What I think this shows today is that financially it had a very, very minimal impact on us, very, very small. And we'll talk about that a little bit further. But I think it was also important as we were able to get a pretty substantial premium on these bonds today because of our smaller size. So we're getting over 400,000 more in additional project proceeds that we can put towards projects. Because we know we have a extensive CIP to go into the future, and it still fits in with the same debt service levy, because we were so conservative initially on our projections related to interest rates, not knowing what the market would be. We were closer to 5 on our projections. And so I think that's, again, another big win of resources, whether it's, where bid pricing is going on projects, we've got some resources to contribute to those. So that's another big success from today's bond sale that I wanted to mention. So
all right. And so we'll get into what the actual cost of 1 basis point is once we get through the presentation. But so in December, we're gonna go through the changes, understanding the new scorecard, looking at the old scorecard and the new scorecard sort of side by side, and then going through each of the details. I'm going to overwhelm you with a few numbers and percentages and details. And then we'll look at some of the other considerations that were extremely impactful for the city of Clive specifically. Then we'll go over the new scorecard of where you are now and talk about sort of the pricing. Moody's Investor Service, it was November 2nd of 2022. They revised their methodology for general obligation credits specifically for US cities and counties. This impacted 1,945 cities and counties that are currently rated by Moody's. And of those almost 2,000 cities and counties, 1,600 saw no change. 252 were on review for upgrade, and 94 were on review for downgrade. And Clive was on review for downgrade. They were one of the 94. Now, the new scorecard, it's similar categories, different weighting, and different metrics and sort of the subcategories. So economy, 30%, no change, just the different sub tiers of what's being looked at did change. Financial performance, that used to be finance, is still 30% weighting overall, but what we're looking at changed. I'm going to get into the details of what changed in just a second. So this is just an overview. Institutional framework, this used to have a 20% rating. This used to be part of the management score. So institutional framework was 10%, and then management of the city got 10%, which is your policies and procedures, different things that Clive has, what it had, I think, a AAA rating on. That's no longer part of the scorecard. And institutional framework for cities in the state of Iowa went from AAA to AA last year as well. So those were two things just in factor 3 that impacted the city before we get to anything else. And then factor 4 is leverage. This is your debt. This looks at long-term liabilities ratio, which is sort of your overall outstanding. That's your debt and your pension obligations, where it used to look at them separately. There was 10% for the debt, 10% for pension and OPEB obligations. Now it's 30% for leverage, 20% being your total outstanding, and then your fixed cost ratio is an annual basis, what percentage of those obligations and payments make up your overall budget for the year. And that went from 20% to 30%. So that's where that extra 10% landed, back from institutional framework now to leverage. And so when we look at them side by side, the old scorecard, economy and tax base, is now just economy, 30%, 30%. Finances used to be just general government. So it used to be your general fund, your employee benefits levy. I talked them into road use tax and your debt service, and that was it. Now your finances is based on all governmental funds and enterprise funds. So it's all your cash and all your debt. So you get both of that. You get the liquidity, you get the financial performance of your enterprise funds, all your governmental funds, and your cash for that too. So that's the biggest difference, I would say, between the old finance and the new financial performance. Management went from 20, which was institutional framework, and then local city management, policies and procedures. You don't really get the benefit of that anymore. And you've done a lot of really good work in that in the past. And so institutional framework now 10%. And again, debt and pensions, which used to be 10% debt, direct debt, 10% pensions, is now 30%, looking on the aggregate for what's your overall liability, and then 20%, and then 10%, what is it as a part of your annual budget. And so that weighting sort of shifted. And then if we look at the subcategories, I'm not going to go through all of the details. This is kind of for your information, but some of the high level changes for economy and tax base, median family income is now median household income. It's a little bit of a nuanced change, but it is different. The full value per capita stayed the same. And now instead of the tax base size, which is your valuation, your assessed value, now it's GDP. Now it's your percent GDP versus the US. So that was a big change. So cities that were relying heavily on being a large tax base lost that, and now it's based on GDP. So a Des Moines, as you can imagine, that's going to pressure more so than a Clive, where that's going to actually give you a benefit, because your GDP, you were already small for AAA. Your tax base was already small for the median for AAA. When we look at finances, we go from it was 15 and 15 for finances, but it was cash balances versus fund balances. Well, since the city of Clive is on a cash basis, those were always the same score. So it was a little bit redundant. But now, instead of looking at the 5-year change and just fund balance of governmental funds, now we're going to available fund balance ratio for available, in your case, it's cash, but it's all funds. It's how much cash is available for your enterprise funds, all of your operating, all of government, non-major government, all of the funds. How much is that? And then the liquidity ratio is cash. How much cash flow do you have? Because fund balance, if you're not in a cash basis, fund balance does not equal cash balance. And so that's why there's a distinction between those two. And then we talked a little bit about the management. The institutional framework used to be 10%, the operating history. And then there were notching factors for financial policies in there that are no longer there. Now it's just the institutional framework, which is all about the laws. It's the unlimited debt service levy in rate or amount that gets you the AA, that's the AA category. But you are limited for certain things, general corporate purposes, and how easy it is and how hard it is for budgeting, that sort of thing.
Real quick, Susanna, and I would add in on that one in particular. With the discussions happening at the State House related to property tax reform, this is where we get hit.
Yeah.
So if there are changes that are that happen that limit our revenue raising flexibility, that can decrease our bond rating potentially. That's that institutional framework. And that is part of the reasons with some of the changes that the legislature has made over the last few years, why it went from AAA to AA in terms of the blanket across all Iowa local governments or those that seek ratings. And so that it could potentially get worse depending on what we see with property tax reform. If current levies that have less restrictions on them are become more restricted, that could impact
Well, even because right now you have levy rate restrictions, but you don't have revenue restrictions. If you impose a revenue restriction and a levy restriction, and especially to what are currently unlimited levies, if I don't know if pension and I haven't seen the latest version of the bill. I saw an update that came out today. I didn't have time to read it, but if we start limiting unlimited levies, but it's also if you limit the revenue and the rate, then yeah, that's where you get into more pressures. Could be
tough for
Mhm.
all, not just us, but everybody,
Yeah.
all Iowa cities.
Yes. So that, and obviously that would roll over into schools too, if they reduce the dollar. Anyway, and that's a TIF issue, but yeah, there's a lot going on. And believe me, Moody's is watching. There's already been a publication based on the change to the dollar for schools. Some of the different things they're doing. Yeah, there's already been some publications, so they're watching. I haven't seen anything come out for cities because it's unclear which direction. The league just put out today. I did see that it is a priority to get something done this year. So the league is recommending we go in favor of the House bill. So it's less restrictive. Okay, and then factor 4 is leverage. So we'll put an asterisk by factor 3 and hope it stays AA. When we talk next year, we'll see. And then factor 4 is leverage. And again, that long-term liabilities ratio is all of your long-term liabilities in total in aggregate, how much you don't have any water revenue debt, you don't have any sewer revenue debt. You have some allocations from WRA that do count, but those would now count in the score, as well as your pension and OPEB obligations and your GO debt. And so that is considerable for some that, have issued debt directly for their enterprise funds. And then that's the total aggregate, 20% for leverage there. And then your fixed cost ratio looks at your annual budget. What percent of those payments, what percent of your revenues does that represent? And so that's
Something
what
to the
that ratio.
legislators as well is if they don't tackle this pension issue, right?
Mhm.
It's out of our control as well.
So that a lot of that it moves into a notching factor now, because whether it's funded or underfunded, IPERS I think has an A rating for being moderately underfunded, which is pretty good for a pension fund for statewide. There's a lot that don't have an A. So it's actually not necessarily been a credit negative, but it's not in there directly anymore.
But you have 2 on your books.
But yeah, we have
Municipal
municipal
fire.
police and fire, yep, as well.
Yeah.
And that one is, at least the last, I think, funded maybe as a percentage of the ratio better.
Mhm.
But again, it's to your point, council member, it is something that's outside of our control, just like the
Yeah.
institutional framework, that item. There's items now, I mean, there've always been items outside of our control, and it's just important to know what those ones are.
Yeah, GDP, I mean, we're trying to figure out what information we need to even compute that. Like, wait, how do you get local GDP information?
Right.
We're figuring it out. We're digging, we're learning, but yeah, it's like, okay. Moody's hasn't been very helpful, but yeah, so we're figuring out how to double check and compute these to know, but yeah, GDP is another thing where you just have very little control over that locally. And this just goes through, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these, I'm last in the agenda. So, but I did want to show you, hyperware, last thing. So these are so when we look at the weighting, there's a score, right? There's a metric, there's a score. I kind of tell you how to calculate it. I show you what the score is and then what the buckets are, right? You've got AAA, AA, single A, and BAA. And then within the AA and the single A, there is a AA1, a AA2, a AA3. AA1 being the highest, AA3 being the lowest. So there's a range within each of those buckets, but this is now how you're going to see in the scorecard, you're going to get a AAA, you're going to get a AA, you're going to get a single A. And I don't think Clive has any single A's in the new scorecard, but we'll get to that in a second. So that's economy, the resident income, the full value per capita, and then the economic growth, which is the GDP. For financial, again, this is going to be all unrestricted, unassigned, assigned, and committed funds. It's everything other than restricted funds for all governmental funds and enterprise funds. Available fund balance, I'm telling you how to calculate all those. So the available fund balance ratio is 35% and the liquidity ratio is 40%. And so the fund balance is actually lower than the old cash balance at 40%. 40% has always been the AAA standard for liquidity for cash. That has not changed, but the fund balance ratio is a little bit lower than that. So institutional framework, AA for Iowa. TBD, put an asterisk on that one, TBD. Leverage, again, total liabilities divided by revenue versus annual liabilities versus revenue. And then depending on where you are as a percentage, you know, you're not at 500% of your annual revenue and obligations. So, and then other considerations. This was the single factor when we had the discussion that was the reason that the city of Clive received a downgrade. Cash basis accounting does not disclose non-cash liabilities, does not account for depreciation of assets, and therefore, in Moody's opinion, does not paint a holistic picture of the financial condition of the infrastructure or the necessity for future capital. So they're giving a 2-notch downgrade, not a 1-notch downgrade, but a 2-notch downgrade for having cash basis accounting. Now, that is just right off the top. So, yeah, a lot of very upset communities. You're not the only one that is cash basis in the Des Moines Metro, and it is what it is. So it's non-negotiable. It's automatically 2 notches. Most of the, I mean, that's really the one notching factor I would say that impacted. And so this is the city of Clive scorecard. The actual scorecard outcome is only 1 notch below where we were. We were a AA2 with a AAA rating, and now you're at a AA3. But those 2 notches put you at a AA1. The negative 2 notches for the financial disclosures is just cash basis accounting versus accrual accounting, because there's no calculation of depreciation. And I don't know what they think is going to happen on July 1st, but for accruals, but there could be some things happening in accruals, I guess. But so actually the scorecard before the notches is stronger than it was before based on the new metrics. Like I said, there's not even a single A in here. I think there was a single A in one of the leverages before. Maybe the pension was a single A. So the scorecard actually got stronger. It's just literally those 2 notches for the cash basis accounting that resulted in the AA1 versus the AAA. So I don't know if you have any questions for me. I did also include in this presentation credit strengths. Nothing changed other than the note that they made about reporting fund balance reporting a fund balance may not provide an accurate representation of available resources because cash basis accounting does not include information on non-cash assets and liabilities. So what does that mean in dollars, right? We priced as AAA last year, it was 10 basis points. And so I put 5 basis points because that's what I thought in the good old days, but apparently that's different. So it's 10 basis points today. I would have guessed 5. So I would say probably add 5 to 10 basis points to each range, because I also think that we are seeing interest rates that are lower than what the market even is dictating right now because volume is down. So I think it's artificially suppressed where rates are right now. As volume starts to tick up, as people start to borrow for their summer projects, I expect those rates to rise. So Clive is borrowing at a really good time. And actually, you timed it right last year, right before rates went up. Clive finished. You were one of the first issuers last year before rates started to rise. So yeah, so you've just timed it right. I mean, we can't take credit for that. The market moves how the market's going to move. But so we calculate the present value of 1 basis point, which is $2,120. So for the $3.5 million deal, that's a total of $21,000 in over a 10-year period. That's the real cost today of being a AA1, which is a very strong rating.
What I would say to that is, so the cost factor, like for example, we decided we had a goal of becoming a modified accrual basis accounting system in our city. The expense for us to go to that, for both the training and staff additions and accountants and things that we would have to do, far outweigh 21,000 over 10 years. So why I wanted Suzanne to do that is I know, of course, we've had a AAA for 10 years. I would have loved to keep the AAA for another 10 years. This day was going to come, whether it was institutional framework or when we max out of our new development as a city. What I wanted to do is provide context of what does that really mean going down one spot to AA1. It is, in terms of the cost to our taxpayers, it's very, very minimal over a 10-year period. So again, we'd love to have kept the AAA, but I think it was important to give the cost context of at least
That's
at this
just-
day in the market,
That's just on this GO issuance though, right?
just on this issue.
Yeah, I
yes.
mean, in future ones, it could be different.
Right, it could be different, and some of that I would argue it's probably more important whether we're bank qualified or not.
Correct. Yes.
So we're under the $10 million overall issuance now. We're the WRA, for example, is an overlapping debt to that. So if they have a heavier year where they're issuing debt that's attributable to Clive, we can't always be the only ones to keep ourselves under that $10 million cap. I would say if we were AAA non-BQ versus AA1 BQ, we're probably lower or close to about the same in terms of the rates that we're getting. So there isn't a huge difference between those two. So it's really that bank qualified, and we're a small enough community and now, reaching our build out that unless something drastically changes, we should be able to stay under that 10 million, which makes us bank qualified and more attractive to a wider range of potential bondholders for us. So that's probably more important, I would argue, going forward. But again, I know that the AAA is also a nice thing to be able to say.
We'll still always have the plaque.
What's that?
We'll always have the plaque.
The plaque will stay in my office.
I want Well, and the other thing that I had shared with Matt that I think it's important to note as to have your rating revised as a methodology change and not with the new issue of bonds. That's a good thing. Like if it was going to happen, to have it be tied to a methodology change when it was part of a larger, and not something that was specific to the city of Clive, I think also protected, because there's always a little bit of an overreaction. If it happens with the bond sale, it probably would have been 15 to 25 basis points. If it was a downgrade, because your report literally would have said downgraded to, which that's not what your credit opinion says today. So if it was going to happen, that's kind of the best case scenario for how it happened.
The way it's
Yeah.
And again, in Iowa, we weren't the only ones. I had conversation with North Liberty's city administrator when I was at the Iowa Municipal Managers Conference. They had the same thing happen to them, the exact same thing, and they're a cash basis city. So now they're a community that's going to grow substantially, probably over the next 10 to 15 years. So at some point, Ryan, there's going to have to weigh, do you switch over to, and it was because of the same notching factors that hurt them. And so it might make sense to make that decision at some point. For us, it's a little different.
And Clive, and you only had one notch change in your actual scorecard. There
Right.
are communities in the metro that had a 2-notch change to the actual scorecard, but their rating didn't change. So I don't know. We're learning the new methodology. So I don't have my good fight put up yet, but I'm learning it. I'll memorize it. And I'll learn how to fight it. But yeah, so, and not to name drop, but Ankeny's AA1, like, Des Moines AA2. So it's not like you're in, Waukees AA2.
Wait a minute, you just said Ankeny, and then it's not like you're in what?
West Des Moines AAA. West Des Moines, West Des Moines and Iowa City, and I think Cedar Falls is AAA now. I think that might be the last city.
It is pretty good for our size.
We were by far the smallest.
So based off the new methodology and other than switching our accounting method, is there anything else that we could or should be doing to help ourselves or
Let's
to
go. I mean, honestly,
strengthen our
like,
position currently, because we know we have things that are outside of our control?
Cash balance.
so I was gonna say cash balance is the one thing you have direct control over, and you're already AAA.
And
You can't be more AAA than AAA. So
but on that one, it's what, and as I've talked about in our budget process, is we have a decent cash balance, but we know what the future holds for that. And so there'll be decision points too of, we have a policy of a 20% floor, 30% above 30% cap, and the 25% target. Based on that, the 25 to 35% range is the AAA, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I think that's what it was.
And so for keeping in that around that target, we should be okay. If we dip below that, then we're not sending the signal that revenue raising or expenditure cutting is happening as a result.
And
That could change
remember,
something
it's
there.
not
That
just
is something
general
we're in
fund
direct
anymore.
control
Yeah.
of.
And it's not just general fund anymore. So now your general
Yeah.
fund can be at 20% as long as you have cash in your other funds that support it too. So not suggesting
Yeah.
that, but I'm just saying it's all cash now, which is different. It's not just general fund. The other thing I would say is the long-term liabilities ratio. That's almost always pressured for Iowa cities, especially if you use TIF. if you use TIF, now TIF revenues do count finally in the ratio, which I've been arguing for 10 years. But as your debt matures, right, your CIP debt's always 10 years. So that rapidly matures. But as your fire station gets paid for, I know there's some new projects in the CIP that might roll into there, but that is one thing that over time, the existing debt, the public safety facility was a large project. That'll mature over time. That'll support that. Or you just fill it in with the new projects as you go. But those are the things I think, just because otherwise it's GD, because the only other scores you have that are AA are your full value per capita. So that's population and your assessed value. And the GDP, like, you know, you already have the highest resident income levels in the state.
We gotta figure out what GDP is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And our full value per capita. is one of the-
I know that our research department in Philadelphia has access to the same database that Moody's uses, so they probably already figured it out. We just haven't had a chance to visit with them. We can access it through them. But yeah, but I mean, knowing how to calculate it, I don't know how you influence it, right?
Yeah.
You know, knowing how to calculate it is one thing, but how do you influence it? I mean, I don't know.
And our full value per capita is one of the
Yeah.
highest in the state too.
Yes.
And it's a AA rating
Mhm.
on here, but it's one of the highest. Our taxable value is
Yes.
almost the highest in the state of sizable cities.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, so it's really your double, I mean, because you're already AAA in the categories you can control. So that's where it's hard to,
But you do need to protect that fund balance, especially where we know we're headed, right? So to add that to maybe taking that cap at 30% off and making it 35, because you're about to ride into some lean years in the next 10, 12, 15 years, right? And taking a look at your
Well-
spend down of not being so heavy, so that as it dips in those lean years, it goes to 28, 27, 26 instead of 20, 18, 17.
and then it becomes fees and charges versus taxes. And then it becomes other revenue flexibility that you have in other ways. So.
Toll booths like Alderman wants to do and other things, right? Like,
to your point, Councilmember, and that was part in this budget process that budget you just adopted, why I advocated for keeping our reserves above the 30% cap and
Yeah.
reserving those, because again, we don't know what the legislature is going to do, and
right.
it gives us time to adjust versus quickly spending that down before we adjust things on the revenue side or the expenditure side. And so that's why and some of it was because of how payments timed in this last year, because we're a cash basis city, where we were over closer to that 40% mark, but we're going to be in the, knock on wood, in the 30s above the cap. And now you have that flexibility to make decisions on, okay, where do we want to take it in this next couple fiscal years? Again, depending on what the legislature lays out for us for property tax reform, and then adapting to that, you have flexibility.
Might want to review that 30% cap in our next summer's strategic planning.
Sounds good. Anything else for Suzanne? Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We'll next move into reports. Pete.
Thank you, Your Honor. For some good news, first baby goats were born. More on the way. So we will be happily sharing that story next week, once we've got most of them arrived. And this year we've got a couple other good stories to pair with that, including fundraising for Greenbelt Landing that we hope to really supercharge this summer with those small and mid-sized gifts. Richard and I are working on that campaign, as well as a number of the supporters from the Community Foundation and other stakeholders.
Cutting it close to those baby goats.
Well,
library programs and such.
The other thing I want to bring to your attention, and you'll see this when you receive the final version of the draft May newsletter. The mayor leads off with quite a bit of information about property taxes and assessments. This was the headline in April, probably for a huge part of our audience. And the mayor wanted to make sure that we were putting a very clear point on what that means and has historically meant for Clive taxpayers. For this coming year, the average household in Clive with average utility usage is going to pay about $2,994 for all of their Clive services and infrastructure, which is about a $50.25 increase from the previous year, 1.7%. Even more interesting than that in my opinion, is how we looked over the past 4 years. Because a big part of the discussion at the legislature with property taxes is that they're running out of control. But actually, this council has a very strong track record of keeping the actual costs to residents under control in Clive. When you look at the last 4 years, so from FY 2021 to the year that we're heading into, the average cost, the cost increase for an average household over that entire 4-year period was $88.22. Very, very reasonable considering how much costs have increased in other places as well. So we feature that on the front page of the newsletter. I bring it up now because property taxes are complex and your constituents are going to look at this and say, hey, really? Is that really the case? Then the math bears that out. We have the documentation to prove that. And if they have questions, we're happy from staff's perspective to help you tell that story. But we want people to wrestle with this and to think hard about this because it is a very great benefit to living in this community, the leadership that you all have provided. If there are questions, please, if you can't come up with the right number or you want additional assets, get in touch with me and I'll be happy to provide those.
Good story.
Anything else? No pothole reports?
There's a lot of potholes out there. We also include that as sort of a standing feature in the main newsletter. I'll get updated tonnage for how much patch we put in. Jeff, I believe, and I talked to some people on your team, weather conditions right now haven't warmed up so much that we can't use the, get in there and do some crack sealing. So we've got some folks out there doing crack sealing now too.
Yeah, that kind of becomes a priority at this time, before the weather gets really hot, the cracks close up, it gets some crack building up. So we're still filling potholes, just we also have a crew doing some crack sealing, trying to keep up with all the maintenance.
Thank you, Jeff.
I will add to that, Your Honor, since we were talking about that, some residents from the country club neighborhood did reach out to staff and the mayor and myself about setting up a time. I think we're going to get together about a month from now when some folks are back in town to talk a little bit about their neighborhood. They have some specific concerns to share, as I've shared with council before. Country Club West, or those vintage of streets, are ones that had a particularly brutal winter. Part of it, there's a lot of history there in terms of the aggregate and the age, and they're definitely deteriorating at a faster rate than we would anticipate. The public works crews have been doing a great job spending most of their time here recently in those neighborhoods because of the potholes that we've had there. And then also here just this last week, we have the concrete patching contractor has started their work in that neighborhood as well. So there's a lot of activity happening, but of course, you know, expectations and how we work through those is part of the communication. And we'll have some updated information. We'll report back to the council on how that conversation goes. I think Councilmember Judkins will also be there as from being from that neighborhood. So just giving you all a heads up on that. But that was probably the concentrated area where we heard the most comments following this last winter. But again, I think they also understand the funding constraints that this council faces, and also the winter and the vintage of those streets and how they seem to crack and break a little bit faster than others. So, but anyway, we'll follow up with you after we have that conversation.
That meeting's in a month or?
Month, yeah.
You said when they get back, our staff is out?
No, it's, I think there's some residents that are out of town and then coming back. They wanted to wait till middle to late May to get all their folks together, to be far enough out.
I see.
Be far enough out schedule-wise.
While they're getting back from the south, have a meeting with the folks that are over in my neighborhood that have stayed, because they'll meet you in the middle now on the streets that are there now, because they were here all the time. They're happy to meet you on the roads that are broke up now. And they could have that talk, but that way we can get more people in on the discussion.
Thank you. Pete, anything else?
Nothing more.
No report tonight, Your Honor.
Okay, attended the Icon Water Trails groundbreaking today along with Matt and Richard. A beautiful day, right at the confluence of the Raccoon and Des Moines Rivers, where the Scott Avenue project will be. And just as a reminder, that's where a lot of the recreational stuff will be taking place. So I had some nice speeches, Mayor Andaway and our chair of our board, Dan Houston, principal CEO, and Angela Connolly as well. So nice event, and yeah, Water Trails is off and running.
Is that when they're taking down that dam, or they already do that?
Well, that work has started.
It's gonna
So
be cool.
yeah, it's certainly not done, but it's begun. So yeah. That's it.
I believe you are chair of the personnel committee. Is there any reminders you need to make at this particular?
Yeah, if we could
juncture?
make sure that we get our city manager evaluations back to me, please, so that we can consolidate those, and we'll be having a personnel committee meeting in a couple weeks, right? So yes, thank you for that reminder.
Eric, do you have anything?
Yeah, a couple of quick things, Mayor. Catch Des Moines CVB Board of Directors met and discussed a couple of things. One is kind of a look back on the success we had with the NCAAs, and also looking at future bids for the NCAA's men's and women's tournament. So kind of looking at those options right there. In addition, discussed upcoming RAGBRAI, which is going to bring a lot of people here in the greater Des Moines metro area, and the logistics behind that. That's a big spend. In addition, Waterworks will be taking the lead on the planning of that. But question of what the roles of the city of Des Moines and Polk County will be. There's a lot of security, a lot of costs associated with that as well. So moving forward with that big event right here. Also, I'm a member of the budget committee. We met and approved the budget for our next fiscal year as well.
Anything else, Eric?
That'll do it. Thank you, sir.
Good. Wanted to remind everyone of the spring cleanup, formerly known as the mayor's cleanup. I don't know how I lost the name there, but I did.
Not a bad thing.
Maybe it's not a bad
It's
thing.
not a bad thing.
So the hood side, the
That's
side,
right. The east side.
these sides this weekend, and the other half is the following weekend. Just remind everybody, there doesn't seem to be as much stuff
It
out as
doesn't,
in the
yeah.
past. So,
But they're already making their rounds.
Yeah.
There'll be plenty of
There are plenty of
scavengers.
cars.
Yeah.
Do we increase our patrol during these?
No.
what are you worried about?
Nothing. The hood's good. We take care of.
I have seen a pickup once that had about 50 like patio, like lawn chairs
Yeah.
stacked up in the back. I was a little worried about the safety
Might
of
be.
anybody driving near that truck.
Kinda going like
but
that.
I don't know, we do not increase our patrol during this time.
Yeah.
The other thing, and I don't know if Rick wants to add to this, but Lieutenant Decker's retirement reception was this week. There was practically standing room only for it. The one thing I wanted to forward on about that is that he was so appreciative of his time served in Clive and the support he got from the city. And he mentioned that multiple times. So I wanted to pass that on as well. Rick, I don't know if you have anything you want to add?
Just a couple things. One, thank the mayor and Susan, they were able to make it. It was great seeing them. Eric and his family all came up to me afterwards and were very appreciative. He worked through some pretty difficult and challenging workers' comp issues through his employment with another city, and they were incredibly thankful the way Clive treated him. And I was just very appreciative and wanted to make sure that the city understood that. So thank you.
Thanks, Rick.
Chief, Mayor, if I can, Chief, would you also mention, the mayor and I were at a program up at the firehouse for promotions, and it was a big class. Maybe mention that, just.
Yeah.
I was amazed by how many people were there and how many promotions you were giving out.
Yeah, we're trying to do promotional ceremonies, one in the spring and one in the fall. And we've had a number of leadership changes, as you're all aware. So we had Chief Garcia, we had.
I'm sorry, who?
Soon to be Chief Garcia. Fire Marshal Boyle, Lieutenant Colby, and then there were at least 6 other staff that have completed their orientation process. So it was standing room only. And we did a family night, had a bounce house after that. And it was a big hit, a wonderful night, and appreciate everybody that was able to make it.
Thank you, Rick.
Yep.
And I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, what was really cool is, I know I probably shouldn't say the back room stuff, but lots of things were happening that night. The place was full of family. The Harbach Center was full of families. And they had to do a real quick switch because so many places were full of families and they're being used. This is a testament of everything going on in the city, that there was a quick switch and nobody really even knew what was happening, right? The fire guys just made it happen and the bounce house showed up and the grills showed up, food showed up, and it looked like it should have just happened at the fire station. So
Yeah, I was proud of the staff. They
Yeah.
just, and we're kind of in the business when things are going wrong to make things better, and they just pivoted and happened. And again, like you said, nobody really knew the difference, and it
Right.
probably worked out better there anyway.
yeah, that's
They're
pretty.
good at crisis.
And it tells you how trusted the mayor is because somebody actually gave him their baby during one of the
I got a
photos.
picture. I got a
And-
picture of
and,
it.
uh,
I got a
The
picture.
mayor was holding a baby in a photo.
They
So
need a picture and they just turned to the right and went,
He did well. If you're looking for a babysitter, he did a fantastic job.
oh, that was a great event. Sorry.
Hey, your turn.
Thank you. That was,
Wasn't his turn?
no, that was my,
Wasn't his turn.
that was my mayor pro tem turn. Now I get 2 turns. Now I get my council turn. WRA, very interesting. Moved into our first meeting of a committee that I'm on for the governance committee. So it's getting a bit, it's not heated, but a little dicey and a little edgy. That there's open talk now with all the committee. There's 2 seats by Des Moines there. I have a seat, Jody Smith, EJ Giovanetti from the county. So Jody is from the city of West Des Moines. Pleasant Hill has one for the chair. I have one because of the vice chair seat. And there's open dialogue now of how the governance should be run. Des Moines wanted to quickly pivot it to the operation contract, which is a completely separate discussion. And we are making sure it's completely separate. They wanted to make it happen at the same time. They have said that they do not want the 28E to happen until they get a operations agreement. I asked why not. And I said that my stance was there should not be an operation agreement until the 28E is changed. I said, that's the carrot and the stick. So if you want an operation, that did not go over well with the mayor of, there was 2 mayors in the room. It kept getting confused with what mayor was being talked to, but that was the Des Moines mayor did not take that lightly. And so I asked what the worry was, if it could happen like DART happened, it just happened 2 or 3 years ago. Metro Waste is a 2080. WRA is a 2080. MPO isn't far off of that model. So why couldn't it happen? So they want a 10-year agreement for operation before they change the 2080. I suggested the 2080 happens, or we just continue an annual or an 18-month. It's written in the contract, they have to have an 18-month out on the operational agreement. So you just continue 18 months until we get a 2080. So it went to a stalemate at that point. And we agreed to kind of disagree after an hour and a half. We also had a lengthy, uncomfortable conversation about the, I can't get too much into this one, but of the executive director's position. How it was balanced, right? Who was the boss of the executive director? And I did get him to finally say, it's Scott. It was, I said, it seems to be 2 people, Public Works and Scott.
Scott
city-
Sanders.
Scott Sanders, city manager, and then the board. Scott Sanders said, well, it's me. kind of the board. And you've got a board committee sitting in there, of 6 people saying, that's uncomfortable. So we're gonna work that out.
Who are the Des Moines reps on this?
Vosen and the mayor. Frank. So what's coming out of this is the RFP is now in, and I have the 4 bids. Everyone on the committee has the 4 bids for our own attorney. So we are hiring our own board attorney to negotiate these items for us. Yeah. Des Moines wanted us to, of course, to use theirs. They're adamant to keep the executive director. I did say, why? They said, well, we just like to have an executive director. I said, well, the board likes to have an executive director. Show me one other 28E that doesn't have the executive director under the board. They just kept saying, well, we want to have the executive director. They also mentioned they like to have the folks under them to be snow plowers and other things. And I said, Clive would like to have their proportionate share to snow plow during the winters as well. And so would every other city in this room, but I'm certain you won't agree to that. So we kind of left it at that point. They had to go to a tree planting. That's my report. More to come.
Okay. Legal counsel.
Nothing further.
The only item I have, Your Honor, in the spirit of regional entities is myself and legal counsel will be sending any comments back that we have in the next couple of weeks on the latest 2080 for Central Iowa Waterworks, which has its own executive director in it, by the way, you know, the way it's written. So, Central Iowa Waterworks, I think things are very much in a positive direction on that. Met with Jody Smith, who's been involved in that one as well, and kind of has been checking in with a lot of the suburban communities and water utilities. And I think we're on a good path, and we want to take our chance to look through it as well. One thing that we'll talk to the mayor about is that we'll need to probably indicate if we're a party to the 2080 sooner rather than later is who our representative will be to that, because there's likely that activity will start early before the board, the date of the actual organization starting to get the foundational bylaws and things in order before that, and kind of have working groups, if you will, of the future board. So more information to come on that, though. I haven't followed up with you yet on that, Mayor. So
Timetable.
Don't have one yet, but I would say by the summer.
Summer
is the rough idea that I've gotten. By the end of the summer, we'll probably need to indicate that. So
and probably an elected then.
Yes, I would recommend for sure that the primary representative definitely be elected. You could have myself as maybe an alternate, but I would suggest you probably initially with your history. But that's up for your discretion. So
Do the bylaws not dictate that?
I don't know yet. But I would say that the preference is always going to be electeds for all those representatives.
That was another
particularly the
big
primaries.
argument with WRA was the voting rights and weighted votes. And they wanted 5 or 6 on their board. We the rest agreed to a 60,000 population vote. They are not in favor of that, but I don't think they're going to win that vote. But it got down to this, what this new board was going to look like. So I think they're all watching this.
It's all weighted, yeah. The way, at least the last time I heard and I haven't read through any new details on the board governance and any changes from the first draft of the 2080, it was all weighted voting. So you would only have to have 1 rep in the room, but.
Oh, they still are demanding 4 in the room.
Yeah, Central Iowa Waterworks is not set up that way. It's just when a weighted vote is called.
Sure.
You only need to have 1 person making your vote for your community.
Interesting.
That's all I have, Your Honor.
Any correspondence, Matthew? Anything else for the good of the order? If not, we'll adjourn at 7:29. Thank you.